Most people today imagine medieval Europe as a dark, chaotic place. A world of mud roads, constant wars, hunger, disease, and people struggling to survive from one day to the next. A time when kingdoms were fragile, travel was dangerous, communication was slow, and life expectancy was painfully short. It looks, from a modern perspective, like a continent that should have collapsed under its own disorder. And yet, it didn't. Because hidden in plain sight, there was a system holding everything together. A system so present, so integrated into daily life, that most people never stop to think about it. A structure that connected villages, cities, travelers, rulers, farmers, the sick, the poor, and even entire armies. A network that did not rely on roads, governments, or technology, but still managed to organize an entire continent. That system was the church. If you removed the church from medieval Europe, what would remain is not a functioning society. What would remain is fragmentation, isolation, vulnerability. Because long before modern states existed, long before postal services, hospitals, universities, or public administration, there was already an institution performing all of these roles quietly, consistently, and everywhere at the same time. And most people living at the time had no idea how much they depended on it. Every medieval town was built around a church, not by coincidence, but by necessity. The church was not only a place of prayer, it was the reference point of the community. It was where announcements were made, where agreements were witnessed, where conflicts were mediated, where travelers sought help, and where the rhythm of daily life was organized. The sound of the bells told people when to wake, when to work, when to rest, and when to gather. Before clocks existed, time itself was regulated by the church. Now imagine this same structure repeated thousands of times across Europe. From the smallest village chapel to the largest monastery on a hill, every one of these places was part of a larger web. A web of trust, communication, hospitality, food storage, knowledge, and coordination that stretched across kingdoms that were often at war with each other. Political borders divided rulers. The church connected people. Monasteries, in particular, were the silent engines of survival. These were not only places of prayer and silence, they were highly organized agricultural centers. Monks cultivated fields with advanced techniques for the time, stored grains for winter, raised animals, produced cheese, bread, wine, medicinal herbs, and maintained reserves not only for themselves, but for travelers and the needy. When famine threatened a region, monasteries were often the difference between life and death. At the same time, these places were also centers of knowledge. Inside their walls, books were copied by hand for centuries. Ancient Greek and Roman texts that would otherwise have disappeared were preserved. Literacy was concentrated there. Education happened there. The seeds of future universities were planted there. Without monasteries, much of what we call Western knowledge would simply have vanished. Travel across medieval Europe seems at first glance almost impossible. Dense forests, mountains, rivers, bandits, foreign territories. And yet, people traveled. Pilgrims crossed thousands of kilometers to reach holy sites. Merchants moved between regions. Messengers carried news across the continent. How? They moved from church to church, from monastery to monastery, following a chain of known safe places that offered shelter, food, and directions. The Church created the first reliable travel network in Europe centuries before anyone planned it. And when the Crusades began, this same network suddenly revealed its full power. Tens of thousands of people crossed an entire continent, not because they had maps, but because they were walking inside a system that already knew the way. The Church was also responsible for something we rarely associate with it today: healthcare. The first hospitals in Europe were born from religious communities. Monks and nuns cared for the sick, the wounded, the abandoned, and even lepers when no one else would. Hospitality to strangers was not optional. It was a religious duty. This created a culture where help could be expected almost anywhere, as long as there was a church nearby. Even the calendar that organized medieval life came from the Church. Feast days, holy days, Sundays, periods of fasting and celebration structured the year. People did not measure time in months as we do. They measured it between religious events. The rhythm of society was spiritual, but its effects were deeply practical. Kings and rulers understood this very well. That is why they sought the support of the Church, not only for legitimacy, but because they knew that this was the only institution truly present in every corner of their territories. The Church media. The Church mediated conflicts, witnessed treaties, and acted as a neutral authority when political tensions threatened stability. When you step back and look at the bigger picture, a surprising truth emerges. Medieval Europe did not function despite its limitations. It functioned because of an invisible infrastructure that compensated for all of them. An infrastructure made of stone buildings, bells, fields, books, hospitality, and faith. And this system was so effective that people living inside it rarely noticed it. To them, it was simply how life worked. Food appeared when needed. Shelter could be found. News traveled. Knowledge survived. The sick were cared for. Travelers were guided. Communities were organized. It felt natural, but it was anything but accidental. This is the hidden system that kept medieval Europe alive. And once you begin to see it, you start to realize that the Crusades were not an exception. They were a demonstration of what this system was capable of when pushed to its limits. Because if this network could feed armies, guide thousands across continents, preserve knowledge for centuries, and organize daily life for millions of people, what else was it quietly doing that we have completely forgotten today? And that is where the story becomes even more fascinating.